Welcome to REB Talks, a student-run podcast hosted by our Liberal Arts Dean Student Advisory Council. My name is Chloe, and in today's episode on Communication and Connection, we have Renisha O'Donnell in the studio. Renisha is a consultant, leadership coach, and education advocate dedicated to developing a culture of compassion that is rooted in equity. Thank you for being here with us, Renisha.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, to dive right in, today's topic is communication and connection. But before we get started, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure. Thank you so much. My name is Renisha O'Donnell, and I am a consultant. I am a leadership coach and mentor, as well as I have a master's degree in education for school counseling. I am a practitioner of sound and vibration therapy. So I wear many hats and
That's awesome.
have a wealth of information in my mind, and and I really value education, and I am here to just share my thoughts on connection and communication.
All right, thank you. It's awesome. It sounds like you have such a good amount of experience and like different things you do and a great education. So we're really excited to hear from you. So, with today's topic, do you feel like communication and connection are some of the most important concepts for creating and leading a strong team?
I do. I really think that with communication and connection, it really allows you to understand who your team is, understand yourself, which is actually the most important piece, because if you don't understand who you are as a person, it's really hard to relate to this world. So communication is definitely key for the relationships between people, and connection is what helps build those bridges. So I really do think that they are some of the most important pieces when it comes to being within teams, working within teams, as well as leading teams.
Awesome. Thank you, Renisha. That is beautiful insight. Definitely, like, we can get caught up in our connections with each other, but our connection with ourselves is equally important. So
Yes.
thank you for that. So, just generally, how do you work to establish a culture of communication and connection among the teams you lead and within your entire career?
So I really try to prioritize compassion first, because I really think that folks can't show up as their best self if they don't feel that someone actually cares. And so I prioritize compassion and open communication, which means a lot of listening. And so being able to listen to what people are saying and not saying, I think is important. And within my profession, I really do think that people will put their best foot forward if they know that they are seen as a whole person and not just this person that's to drive numbers or to get statistics. Like, do you really care as a leader? Do you really care about them as a whole person? So
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. I think most of us can relate to where we've had those bad bosses who don't care about us as people, and it's very clear. So that's wonderful that you use that approach.
thank you.
Moving forward, do you have any specific strategies you recommend for fostering open and genuine communication between your employees and any clients you might have?
I do. It goes back to listening. I call it deep listening. Listening with all of your ears and eyes, and listening for what's not being said, listening to the body language, and ensuring that you really have a reflective time to process so that you understand what a person is saying. So, for example, if someone says, I really think this room should be red, but their body language is showing you something else, it prompts you to dig deeper, to ask more questions, to say, are you okay? Can you tell me why red? Like, let's talk a little bit about this red, just so you can maybe get down to what is it that the body is showing us versus the words. And what you might find is that the person doesn't want it to be red, but someone else told them that it should be red, so it's not really something that they may believe in. So I think that it's important to get to know the person as an individual, and that really can allow you to kind of build that connection. It's important in leadership to understand where motivation comes from for folks. Not everybody is externally motivated. Some people are intrinsically motivated, and understanding that, you may have one staff member that is motivated by their paycheck, and you may have another that's motivated by the work that they do. And so just understanding that, and understanding that they're a whole person outside of the role, outside of the job. They have whole lives that are just as complex as my own life, right? So, so knowing that each person is unique.
Wow, that is so kind. It sounds like you have a very holistic approach to your relationships with each individual. So that's just wonderful. Do you think you could provide a specific example of when communication and connection allowed you or your team to thrive?
Yes. Excuse me.
You're good?
So I really think thriving is something that everyone is striving for. And I think that sometimes we think about it as a destination, but it's really the journey, right? Because there's going to be ebbs and flows. And so there's going to be times where even when things feel chaotic and even when things are not going right, that there's still thriving in there because you're relearning how to communicate. You're relearning how to problem solve. And so I think that having a team of folks, I've worked with in this education space, and I've worked with a lot of folks that they show up and what their strengths are may not be what I'm asking them to do. And so understanding that each person has a different set of strengths and skills, and knowing how to pair people up. So if someone is not doing as well with their strength, I've been able to say, hey, other team member, can you actually go over to this other team member's school, show them the system that you're using so that they can, maybe adopt some of the things that you're doing, or ask you some questions about how you, are being successful with this particular task. So obviously not without consent, letting that other team member know, like, hey, I'm going to send somebody over to your school to help guide you in this area, because it's not going to be that your leader is the person that has the answers for everything. And I think that is part of leadership, is knowing that you don't have the answers for everything. And so doing that with our teams, it really helped that team member to feel supported, as well as the other team member to feel like, oh, like here I am mentoring this person. And so, but that really builds a team dynamic, because we can't do it alone,
Yes, that is so wonderful. I think it would be beneficial for more leaders to kind of highlight the strengths of each team member and have them help each other. You're right, definitely one person isn't going to know everything, so that's really nice. You have them help each other. So, thinking back to your personal life, in what ways do you prioritize and enact communication and connection?
So in my personal life, I can just give an example of my partner and I, and the communication that we've learned to do over the time. And one of the things that we prioritize is gratitude, because it's so easy to point out all the flaws that another person has, or that your job has, or you can point out all the flaws, but what are all the things that you're actually grateful for? So prioritizing gratitude and talking about that, like, here are the things that I'm grateful for within this relationship, or within my life in general. And having that as a foundational dialogue really keeps us grounded in a space where it's hard to be angry or upset if you're grateful for things. Like, your brain is not able to hold those two emotions at the same time. And the other piece is acknowledgement, like acknowledging that you had some shortcomings, acknowledging that maybe you made some mistakes or you weren't able to complete something that you said you were going to do without the other person having to come to you to say, oh, I can't believe you didn't do this, you know. So that is something that we have implemented in our communication, and it really has helped to be able to not have resentful feelings or, you know, because I think we automatically think people are doing things to us. But in reality, everyone is just living in their own world. You know?
Right.
No one is ever really doing something to us intentionally. They're just living in the way and doing the things that they feel comfortable doing. So, and then in my friendships or in, you know, any kind of personal socializing, I really just try to listen.
Yeah.
Listen and just let people be who they are. I think we do spend a lot of time trying to change people. You know, we want to tell them the 10 things that we want them to do to make us feel comfortable. And I really like to just see people as they are. So just being accepting that everybody is different. Everybody has their quirks and everybody has their, you know, their ways that they walk around in this earth, and acceptance.
Wow, that is such amazing wisdom. I think it is so common, especially for romantic relationships, for just miscommunication to be rampant. And that acknowledgement is really important, and the gratitude. So I'm really grateful you brought that up.
Thank you.
So you already did kind of provide an example, so I'm going to move forward after that. This is a little bit more specific. How can you effectively communicate through conflict? And what strategies can help when you're trying to respectfully overcome conflict?
So this is a good question. I think that a lot of times we think that conflict should be avoided, and it's impossible. So
yes.
So knowing that it's impossible to avoid conflict, and just being okay with that, like understanding that conflict is gonna come. It's gonna come up. So one of the best things that that I like to do is use a lot of I statements. So if there's something I'm upset about, I'm not gonna say you did this, you know. So using those I statements, so that I'm expressing what it is that I feel or what I am upset about. And not that someone made me feel a certain way, but it's like I feel this because, you know, when this happened, I felt this, you know. Again, acknowledgement and taking accountability for the parts that we play in the miscommunication that happens.
Yes.
Because it's often you can, like, look at the other person. It's so clear. You're like, they did 10 things, 1 through 10.
Yes.
Whereas when you're looking at yourself, you're like, oh, maybe I did 1 through 5, you know? So being able to be self-reflective. And I recently started utilizing what's called nonviolent communication. And it's a book written by a gentleman by the name of Marshall Rosenberg. He's a psychologist. And there's 4 key components that you use to kind of communicate to overcome conflict, or just to communicate in general. And if I can share them.
Of course.
Yeah, so it's observation, feelings, needs, and requests. And so, like, giving the observation. So, you know, I noticed that, you know, there wasn't a bowl of candy here for me.
Good example.
Yeah, I noticed that there's no bowl of candy. I feel, you know, disappointed about that. What I need is candy the next time I arrive. And so I'm just making the request, you know, can you have candy available for me the next time I come? So that statement and the way that I shared that, I mean, it's funny. I'm making a joke, you know, about candy. However, just using that as an example, that feels so much better than being like, I can't believe you don't have a bowl of candy here for me.
Yes.
You know? So there are different techniques that, you know, that you can use, and really it's about identifying how things are making you feel as an individual, and then what is the need that you have that hasn't been met, because it's always a need. Conflict comes from some need that's unmet. And what is the request that you have?
Wow, that sounds such an effective way of communication. I definitely need to pick that up. I liked how you mentioned that conflict is inevitable. I think it is so common for us to just try to avoid it at all costs. And if we just embraced it and like tried to work through it, then things would go so much better, probably in all areas of life. So I really appreciate how you brought that up.
Thanks.
So this is kind of a different topic, but thinking about social etiquette, do you think there are any elements of that that are crucial for effective communication?
So social etiquette, I think, is subjective. I think it's cultural. I think it's generational. So I don't know that there are specific social norms or etiquette pieces that would help in communication, because culturally, I mean, there's going to be times where me as a Black woman, you know, within my culture and even within my family dynamic, like, I'm not going to be able to say everything that I need to say or everything that I feel, you know, to a parent or grandparent, you know, an elder in the family, because that's our communication etiquette, right? So I think that that's similar to other people from different cultures. So I really think that you have to lean into what the etiquette is within your culture, and if it's something that you feel passionate about and you feel that you want to shift the dynamic, you know, starting kind of slowly to introduce more open communication. I mean, there's many things within different cultures that it's frowned upon to talk about. And so if you feel passionate about shifting that, you know, having those conversations slowly, you know, with groups of people can really help guide that if you want to be a more open communicator. So I just think it's cultural.
That is really great. It definitely isn't one size fits all. So that makes so much sense. And I think that also helps us to consider, like, when we interact with different people, to consider their cultural background, to consider maybe someone's older, maybe someone's younger, so they have different values. So that's really great. I think thinking about social etiquette in a one size fits all way just doesn't work. So I appreciate how you brought that up. So we kind of touched on this, but thinking about if you make a mistake, what ways can you do or use to kind of repair that through communication and connection?
Acknowledgement.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I think understanding that, you know, everybody is so different. And your intention might have been one thing, but the impact is different for each person, right? So being open to hearing that, hey, you harmed me in this way, or you hurt my feelings, or when you did these things, I didn't like it. You know, you have to be open to hearing those things, and sometimes that is hard.
Yes, yes.
Sometimes that's hard, and so I think being open, being able to acknowledge that you did make a mistake, and also acknowledge that even though you didn't intend to hurt someone's feelings, if that was the result, you still need to apologize. You know, like, I apologize that your feelings were hurt, not in a rude way. You know,
Right, yeah.
Some people say, well, I apologize that your feelings were hurt. I don't mean it that way.
Right.
But, you know, being able to apologize and say, I had no idea that it impacted you this way, and that, you know, it wasn't my intention, and I do apologize that is how it felt for you, you know.
That is very well said. I think even just thinking about my own life, sometimes it's so hard. Like, you hear something, made a mistake, and you're like, that's not what I did. Like, that's not what I meant.
Right.
But
right.
it doesn't take away how the other person felt. So.
Right.
That is very well said. This leads into our next question.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the dangers and consequences of miscommunication?
So I think that consequences and dangers really, it can be so vast. I mean, even life and death.
Right.
You know? Because if you're in an emergency situation, a miscommunication can be wrong medication. It can be, saying the wrong thing and having it result, in further harm. So I think that really more harm can come when there's miscommunication. And I always say, when in doubt, if you just ask questions, ask more questions than making assumptions. And I think that, our society does not encourage a lot of question asking. It's often that, if you're asking too many questions, people are like, oh,
yeah,
you're asking too many questions.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like you're seeking clarity, right? And using more curiosity, like just being curious. Like, I need to seek clarity, and I'm curious about what this is, so that you can eliminate the miscommunication that does happen.
That is very well said. That really strikes a chord with me as someone who I believe myself to be a people pleaser, and sometimes you just don't want to ask too many questions. You don't want to bother someone. You don't want to come off as annoying, but you really just do need clarity sometimes. So definitely it helps to just be open to putting that forward, and if someone reacts poorly, then that's their issue. There's only so much you can do.
I also think that practicing with people that you trust, like even role playing in a practice situation where you're saying, hey, listen, like I really want clarity in this other situation. Can I just practice with you? Because being able to say the things that you want to say out loud, the more you say it, the more comfortable you're going to feel. Yeah. So if you can practice with a friend, saying it 10 times, trying to muster the courage to say it once is going to feel a little bit different because you've verbally said it more than once to another person, not just the mirror or.
Wow, that is such a great idea. That would help so much. I'm definitely going to implement all the things you're talking about. Just building that confidence. I can definitely relate to that. So let's say, personally or professionally, you have a relationship and things kind of just become disconnected. How would you go about trying to repair that disconnect?
I think it's, again, acknowledging that there's a disconnect. I've had a scenario where a staff that I was supervising, was starting to show up differently. They were not as enthusiastic. And it felt like their communication with me was just, like, I just could feel that we were not as connected, and that there was maybe some miscommunication going on. And I asked directly, I said, hey, is everything okay with us? I just noticed that we're not communicating as well as we used to. Did something happen? Did I do something to offend you? Is there something that we should talk through? And, that person was able to kind of just be open about how I was showing up from their perspective, and how some of the things that I had done, some actions that I had taken, made them feel. And so it kind of shut them down, and it made them feel disconnected. So, and not everybody is comfortable, confronting that. However, I think you have to confront it in order to repair it. And the repair doesn't happen overnight. And both people have to be willing to repair, whatever harm is done in a relationship. And I think in the workspace, if you can work together on something where you're trying to accomplish a common goal, you can set aside some of those things for a little bit so that you can accomplish that goal, and it gives you just some time to process or to reflect, like what is really happening here. Can we still work together? And really knowing that sometimes relationships, they do become disconnected. People are growing. Each of us is different. We have different things going on in life, and at different points in life you just might be becoming a different person, and that disconnection might remain. However, in the work setting, you still have a goal to accomplish, and can you put that aside and still accomplish the goal?
That is very well said. I really liked the recurring themes we have of acknowledgement and accountability, because sometimes, like, saying it out loud, it seems so simple, but it's really not. It's really not obvious when we're just going about our lives personally and professionally. So I appreciate that those are reoccurring themes, and I think we could all learn from them. So thinking about, like, when you have a lot of people you work with, how do you make sure you maintain a good connection with each person individually?
So having a schedule, like a routine scheduled check-in, where you have an opportunity to check in with that person to see how are things going, not just work, like when we talk about trying to be, and I put air quotes for the word productive, because I have feelings about that word. But I do think setting the time aside, checking in, and asking the person genuinely, like, how are they doing? What is it that they're excited about that's upcoming for them in their personal life? If they have a family and they shared something with you in the past, hey, how's that thing going? How's your child or your grandchild? Really just genuinely, not just not to check a box, genuinely asking about that. And I know that sometimes I have started check-ins where I'm like, okay, well, I want to just dive in to the work. I'm like, oh, we got all these things to do. But the reality is those things are not going to be getting done if this person is not feeling like they can be their whole self. Because there's going to be times that you check in with someone and they've had a horrible week. Am I really going to be asking them, well, show me the numbers? Like, did you do your paperwork? I mean, some people might. I won't be asking that. I'll be asking, is there another day? Is there, do you need some time today? And is there another day that we can connect about these other things? Because your mind is not there.
Yes, I think that's so beautiful. It really goes back to just the empathy and compassion. So I really appreciate how you want to acknowledge everyone individually. I think even within groups, like just any group, it's so hard to maintain a connection with each person if it's a big group. But I like that you said scheduling it, like making sure it gets done, not just having it as an afterthought.
Right.
So I'm definitely going to implement that as well. The next question I have is, what advice do you have for developing good connections with people who may be a bit difficult to work with?
I think that, I can be a bit difficult to work with. So,
keep it real.
So knowing that you have your difficult parts too.
Wow.
That somebody else may say, Renisha is... she gets on my nerves. She's always asking questions. Like, I don't know, So knowing that that person may feel difficult to you, but I think about what is it within myself that I'm bothered by what this person is, how they're showing up. So that is something, just being self-reflective. And then trying to get to know the person, because sometimes people are guarded and that may show up as difficult, but it might be because they've had negative experiences at work, or they don't want to get close to people, or there's always something. There's always something beneath the surface. And so I think just trying to get to know someone and understand where they're coming from, and knowing that just because you feel bothered by them, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. But like, what is it within you? Like, what is it within me that I feel so bothered by this person? Because they're just being themselves, So.
Wow. I feel like that is so profound because sometimes, like, in group settings or in workplaces, it's so easy to just label someone as difficult to work with. And, like, maybe if we just got to know them, we would understand what they're going through. And I also really liked how you brought up accountability again and just self-reflecting. Like, I might be difficult to work with at times. That's definitely important to keep in mind, just so we can have compassion and empathy, and just not label people as difficult to work with when maybe they're just going through something. So, with your communication skills, do you think they're kind of like a muscle that's been grown over time and built over time, or what does that look like in your experience?
Yes, for sure. It's practice, it's learning, it's making mistakes.
Yeah.
It's definitely something that you can improve. You're not born with the communication skills that you can develop over time, so it is something that you can continuously develop, which is a great thing. So there's always a starting point if you want to, develop your communication skills. And so I think for me, I've been talking a long time. My family says that I started talking when I was 2, and in full sentences. And my mother was like, "Oh my Lord, what are we gonna do?" She's talking. I remember growing up, and in school I was labeled like talks too much in class, is overly concerned with what's going on with the other students.
Oh my goodness.
So I was like, I'm glad I made a career of this. But but talking itself is not necessarily communicating. So learning to listen is definitely, I think, one of the biggest components of communication. Because a lot of times we think about the inflection of our voice, or are we projecting? And those are technical skills that you can improve when you're, learning maybe public communication or public speaking. But listening is truly one of the most important pieces.
Wow, that was really great when you said talking is not always communicating. Definitely, I've seen examples of that. I'm sure I've made examples of that myself, but that's really good. It's like thinking about having a growth mindset with it. Like,
Absolutely.
If someone thinks they're bad at communicating, it's not final, it's not permanent.
Right.
And just if you do practice, then maybe things can do better. So I really appreciate your perspective on that. How do you think these skills with communication and connection have helped you to grow your personal brand and business?
So, in growing your personal brand and business, it really takes faith. And it takes just really vulnerability and faith, right? So being vulnerable and just sharing with the world what you want to do, what you feel passionate about, is not always easy. And I think that I have developed good relationships with colleagues and, people in different industries, because I do genuinely care about other people and what they have going on. And I show up in the way that is quite positive, And so I think that being able to show up in that way has helped me be friendly enough to build connections with people, because sometimes you have to have that friendliness or approachability so that you can start to build a relationship with people. So I do think that in building a business, there's a lot of other components. It's not just what you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so who you know is equally as important, and your network of people. And because if you don't know everything and you're trying to do it all on your own, I mean, that's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you can reach out to people and say, hey, can you help me with this?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm trying to do this. Do you know anyone? That it makes it a little bit easier. So I do think asking for help, though,
Mm-hmm.
is something that I still practice. I still practice being vulnerable to say, hey, I need help with something. So it's a journey that
Yeah.
just keeps going.
Oh, that's awesome. I think it's really nice how you focus on building relationships with people, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not just cold and calculated, like I have to network to get this out of someone or like to grow my career, but it's very personal, and it's
Mm-hmm.
about that you actually care about people. So I think that's beautiful. So, in a professional setting, do you think that first impressions are pretty important for building connections? And if a first impression doesn't go too well, what can you do to repair it?
I do think first impressions matter,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that they can be repaired.
Okay. Yeah.
I think that everybody has an off day. Everybody
Mm-hmm.
has things going on. If something tragic happened and you're trying to make this first impression and you're not, it looks like you're scattered or distracted or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, and you don't think that you've made that positive first impression, I mean, you can always, not that I'm advocating for communication,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm saying you can always just communicate, hey, I got a lot of things that happened today, and I may seem distracted, and I just want you to know, or I want to ask for you to give me grace
Mm-hmm.
right now. And I can really, it's not necessarily about proving yourself, but being genuine, because I think people can appreciate people being honest.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I think repairing first impressions, you can acknowledge it, and asking for a cup of coffee as a
Mm-hmm.
second meeting, or you can ask for, hey, is there a way that we can set up a time for a second meeting? I want to be able
Mm-hmm.
to share some of the things that I wasn't able to share that first time.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think, like you said, people enjoy honesty,
Mhm.
so it doesn't always have to be polished and professional. Like, you
Mhm.
can just keep it real, say, like, I had
Mhm.
a rough day.
Mhm.
So I think that's really wonderful. I think just being honest and open would help a lot of relationships be built more in professional settings.
Definitely. And
Mm.
I think, well, because we're in Las Vegas, there's a lot of what can you do for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it's a hard it's a hard balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so how you were just mentioning, networking so you can get something from something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there are times for that. There are times where if you're networking with an intention to find someone that can partner with you for something, that that is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to take a different approach at times.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that having a mindset of not only what is this person gonna give to me, but
Mm-hmm.
what am I sharing with the world?
Yeah.
What am I giving
Mm-hmm.
in these relationships that I'm seeking? Because you can't expect people to give to you if you're not willing to reciprocate.
Wow. Yeah. That really relates back to that self-reflection. So
Mhm.
that's a really good point. Like, not just seeking out what can be done for you, but what do you have to share?
Mhm.
So we're going to start wrapping up, but do you have any final advice for our audience regarding these topics?
Well, I have a question for you.
Wow, awesome.
What kind of leader are you like most comfortable with when in a work setting?
So I would say it would have to be a balance. I like leaders that are very on top of it and have everything under control and planned, but not so much to where they're like too harsh. So I would say also like someone who's very compassionate, someone who's understanding, and someone who just is good at communication while keeping on top of everything.
Okay. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, that was great. I was like, you're asking me a question.
I am.
No, that's so good to think about because it also makes me think about what kind of leader I want to be in the future. So that was really good. Well, thank you so much, Renisha, for that insightful talk. We really appreciate you being here. And before we go, do you have any socials you want to share, like LinkedIn or anything with the audience?
I can share my website. It's just my name, renishaodonnell.com.
All right, thank you. And to our listeners, remember to follow the College of Liberal Arts on Instagram at UNLV Liberal Arts for more content and resources. Thank you so much for tuning in to REB Talks.